Thanks very much for coming to this press briefing, which is a briefing really about work in progress, which we think it's important that now and again we share with the media. We decided that today we're going to focus on matters relating to the National Student Financial Aid Scheme and then also deal with some of the current challenges in some of our post-school education and training institutions and what we are doing about those, as well as just end up with a short briefing about the work of the ministerial task team given the task of developing a comprehensive student funding model. So those are the issues that we want to brief the country about today. At the beginning of the year, I announced that the National Student Financial Aid Scheme would receive additional budget to ensure that all eligible students who have been registered to further their education at a TVET college or university for approved courses are supported. Prior to my announcement, it was clear that NSFAS was unable to conclude funding decisions for especially new university students on the basis of available budget at the time. My ministry then launched a major effort to engage the Minister of Finance and also seek cabinet approval for additional funding to meet the shortfall. The total amount of 47.3 billion rand was subsequently then allocated to NSFAS following the funding shortfall by the Department of Higher Education and Training for the 2022 academic year to cover both TVET colleges and the public universities. Once again, we would like to express our thanks and appreciation to Cabinet and the Minister of Finance for this support. I'm happy to report that with funding certainty, NSFAS was able to timeously respond and release funding to all qualifying students. I'm happy to report that I wish to also upfront to take this opportunity to thank the National Youth Development Agency, together with the Education Training and Development Practices SETA and the SETA employed interns, for their assistance to our young people in their applications and queries with regards to NSFAS at the beginning of this academic year. However, we continue to be constrained by prior challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. As you might recall, my department had to provide support to the extended academic year and ensure that the NSFAS funded students continue with teaching and learning even during the periods of what one would call hard lockdowns in the course of this pandemic over the last 2 years and a bit. In addition, many institutions had to use their own resources to ensure that they support NSFAS eligible students while NSFAS was still awaiting the transfer of funds. In the absence of the upfront payments, we have noted the need to align the start of the academic year with the release of the NSFAS funds. As a result, I requested my department and NSFAS to plan in a manner that will enable students to have funds at the beginning of the academic year. I'm pleased to say that under the leadership of the DG working together with NSFAS, there's been considerable progress in this regard towards future academic years. I made a call to all institutions to ensure that they finalize the submission of their registration data to NSFAS to ensure that there are no delays in processing the transfers. Most institutions heeded the call on time. Perhaps, Ishmael, it's important for me just to explain this a little bit, that normally the glitches and the challenges that we experience regarding the disbursement of NSFAS has got multiple causes, some of which I'm going to outline here, but not only outline those, but also state what we are doing about them. And one of the glitches is this one, of institutions not supplying data to NSFAS on time as to which students qualify in terms of progression, so that NSFAS is able to release money for those students. Today I have received a report from the chairperson of the NSFAS board, Mr. Kosa, and the CEO on the progress made thus far since our last announcement. The report received indicates significant progress made by NSFAS in administering bursaries for students in the 2022 academic year. The report highlights the registration data that has been received by NSFAS from our 26 public universities and 50 TVET colleges, and payments that have been made thus far. One of the key guiding principles in the processing of the funding for all eligible students was the work done by both NSFAS and the Department of Higher Education and Training in ensuring that the 2022 NSFAS eligibility criteria and conditions for financial aid are approved, published, and adhered to. Now, part of this briefing has got to do with the fact that what we want to underline is what is to be done in the wake of some of the glitches and what we are doing as government, together with NSFAS, to address whatever glitches may still be there. The funding policy is a very important instrument in guiding NSFAS processes in making funding decisions, applications, as well as dealing with appeals. I must emphasize that the appeals process has received much attention in the 2022 NSFAS eligibility criteria and conditions for financial aid policy than ever before. The policy is very clear on the categories and criteria for appeals. It addresses previous disparities on the application of the N+ rule between TVET colleges and university students. The policy makes further provision for students who no longer meet the N+ rule to be considered for funding if such students are in university and can prove that they've got 60 or less course credits to complete a qualification. This is on condition the student obtains support from the institution. Now, it's important to see that as government, we are trying very hard to get our students out of the system. That those who are left with few credit and who are promising, they can make certain appeals, provided they are supported by their own institutions on how best to deal with their situation. NSFAS has now developed an appeals system that guides the students through the appeals process. While it took a while for the system to be optimal, I'm happy with the quality of appeals decisions made through this process. For the 2022 appeal cycle, NSFAS has received at least 40,000 appeal applications. NSFAS reviewed and processed 28,000 of those and communicated the outcomes. 12,000 appeals could not be processed by NSFAS because no supporting documentation was attached and submitted as required. This means that in such cases, NSFAS is unable to process and conclude these applications as they are not compliant with the minimum requirement. Contrary sometimes to what our detractors say, NSFAS, as they may explain further for those who may want to ask, has a system to deal with appeals and have actually also improved the turnaround time for the appeals processes. As of 30th May 2022, at least a total of 7.2 billion rand had been paid to universities to cover all allowances, including books, transport, accommodation, and living allowance for 498,942 students studying at universities. NSFAS has also paid 2.8 billion rand to TVET colleges, covering tuition and allowances for approximately 200,000 students. NSFAS received the second tranche of its budget allocation at the beginning of June 2022 which will be used to reimburse universities for tuition costs, as these were not covered with available funds in the first tranche of payment. Universities are due to receive second quarter payments at the end of June 2022. Now, let me focus just specifically now, first, on just university student funding. All of our 26 universities have submitted registration data. In other words, the number and names of students who have registered to NSFAS as expected. However, a few universities must still resolve data exception to enable NSFAS to process registration data. I urge our institutions to really work hard to improve their systems, because some of the things that frustrate students have got less to do with NSFAS sometimes, but has got a lot to do with the university's own and college's own processes. But I'm talking about universities for now. These exceptions relate to students who have not met the funding conditions when being assessed, including qualifications not properly approved and registered by the relevant authority. Furthermore, there are substantial duplicate registrations picked up across the system from universities and colleges for the same students. This is a problem we are picking up that really needs to be addressed, that you find a student registered in more than one institution. In such a case, NSFAS can't pay, because NSFAS doesn't know which institution is the genuine one that the student is actually registered with. Students must be advised on the importance of maintaining one institution where they are registered, and to cancel whatever registration they might have made in other institutions. The total value of registration student data or information received and therefore funded is 33.5 billion rand. And this marks a total commitment of 87% of funds allocated to NSFAS that needs to be distributed. There is lots of progress. NSFAS has confirmed funding for 691,432 students for the current academic year, with 462,983 being female and 227,072 being male students. Now, this is a game changer by NSFAS, and a game changer in terms of hugely increased participation of women in our university system. There has been a new intake of 240,790 SASSA grants students in 2022 academic year alone. This excludes funding from continuing SASSA students or former SASSA students who are in the system. And we will continue to support 1,770 students with disabilities who receive quite a comprehensive set of allowances from the NSFAS fund. Let's remind each other again. We have committed that students with disabilities will qualify for NSFAS if they come from families not only who are earning up to 350,000, but who are earning up to 600,000 rands per annum, because of this government's commitment to assist those of our people and students with disabilities. Out of this number, 362,482 continuing students with 136,460 new students having been funded during this period. I must indicate that students registering in multiple institutions, as I have said, continue to be a challenge. We have found, for instance, that 2,481 students have registered in more than one institution, and NSFAS has received registration claims from more than a single institution. Now, on our side as the department, we are determined to work with institutions and NSFAS to deal with this. NSFAS also is improving its own system. That's why it is able to pick up on this. So that we do not have a situation where a student can be paid for in more than one institution. So we are picking up these problems. But the challenge is that if this happens, it delays assistance, because we can't pay a student who appears to be registered in 2 or 3 institutions at the same time. Another big challenge, to rectify this problem, students are requested to deregister in institutions that they are not studying at and submit evidence to NSFAS so that funds can be released to the correct institution. So we are saying everybody must take his or her own responsibility. Either DHT, where it's got to play its role, NSFAS, where it has got to play its role, institutions where they've got to play their role, as well as students themselves must take responsibility, because it's only by all of us working together that we'll be able to solve this. And not just working together, also each taking your own responsibility. Another big challenge identified is where funding conditions are not met. Students following incorrect academic pathways, registering on non-aligned qualifications, and even new first-time entering students who are registered on qualifications that are being phased out. We are conscious about this, that we don't want to allow funding of qualifications that are actually being phased out or have been phased out. Again, institutions there must help us so that we are not in this situation. All the above requires all institutions and all students to strictly adhere to the approved NSFAS eligibility criteria and conditions for financial aid funding without deviations. NSFAS, I've been assured, will continue to work with institutions to ensure the resolution to the anomalies in the system. On TVET college student funding, Ishmael, I'll be permanent. Ngicela lawa amangconywana, hayi lawa. I'm sorry. Makade utravela uthi iba nama problems. Cheers to NSFAS. On TVET college student funding, for 2022, TVET college bursaries, NSFAS projected a 10% growth in student numbers across all TVET academic cycles to an estimated 395,000 students. In this regard, NSFAS made provisional funding for 380,000 TVET college students. To date, NSFAS has received registration data for close to 200,000 students. This is at about 52% of expected and provisionally funded students in colleges. In seeking to close the gap and understand the issues at college level, NSFAS deployed its staff in May to assist TVET colleges to submit registration data according to NSFAS requirements. This intervention assisted in the improvement of data quality submitted by the TVET colleges. However, this intervention is not sustainable, as NSFAS does not have enough capacity to adequately support TVET colleges at various campuses in this particular way in the long term. Now, DG, this means now this is our challenge as DHT. In terms of, much as monies are difficult, how do we assist to resource or find mechanisms to creatively resource TVET colleges so that they improve their capacity to manage and distribute NSFAS? Because this is one of the challenges that we continue to face. But we are not sitting, much as I am saying this. NSFAS itself has committed to support colleges with a contribution of 500,000 rands per college in the short-term period to appoint financial aid officers. 100 interns have also been funded to capacitate TVET colleges with the help of the insurance SETA and the food bev SETA. I also want to say I expect college principals, and we will measure them on this, to ensure that they work to prioritize improving capacity to handle NSFAS in TVET colleges. The main issue affecting the processing of students in TVET colleges, like universities, is also the problem of multiple registration status and students following incorrect academic pathways. We have to find an explanation for this. Why is this happening? That you find students not only multiple applications, but multiple registration. It doesn't make sense as to how actually does this happen. To rectify this problem, students are required to deregister in institutions that they are not studying, as I have said. As we say, where a student is registered in more than one institution, NSFAS will not be able to pay at all. So we've got to go to the depth of this problem in order to prevent this from happening. Another big challenge that we face with NSFAS funding is where funding conditions are not met, or students following incorrect academic pathways, or registering in non-aligned qualifications. There were 4,287 unprocessed students for payment by NSFAS because of these exceptions that I've just outlined. NSFAS has started a reconciliation and data sharing exercise with institutions for the resolution of these identified exceptions. So work is being done. But we also urge, by the way, also SRCs, Student Representative Council, to work with management and to work with us to be able to address a lot of these problems as they happen at institutional level. I am pleased to indicate that the NSFAS board has recently proposed new policy reforms to improve the efficiency of the scheme, which I have considered and agreed to. These policy changes have proved to be positive in improving service delivery. Now let me talk about other NSFAS administrative issues relating in particular to student accommodation and related issues. Because recently I have been inundated with complaints by students about student accommodation problems, particularly around evictions by landlords. From 2023, NSFAS will take a proactive role for NSFAS funded students insofar as student accommodation is concerned in order to ensure value for money. We don't want NSFAS to be paying decent amount of money for student accommodation, but for students to be staying in shacks. I'll come back to this matter. The centralization of student accommodation has been a subject of much debate in the sector. The challenges facing student accommodation vary from problems of quality, availability and safety of such residencies to challenges on how allowances for accommodation are being claimed for and used. Through numerous engagement with students, student leadership bodies, educational institutions, and student accommodation providers, it is clear that student accommodation remains a major challenge to resolve. This is the case in both private accommodation and student accommodation owned by various institutions, either universities or colleges. There are insufficient beds to accommodate students, and some institutions do not have sufficient quantities and quality of own accommodation. The building of more infrastructure for student accommodation remains a priority for government, and I intend to accelerate such construction, including through partnerships with the private sector. Udaba lokuthi abantwana bethu abafunda emanyuvesi nasemakoliji bahlalaphi yinto leyo engiyibheke ngamehlo okhozi, ngoba ngifuna ukuthi siwuhulumeni, silo mnyango wethu, siqhubeke nokuthi sithole indlela zokufaka imali ekwakheni indawo zokuhlala abafundi bakithi ezihloniphekile, neziphephile, nefanele abantwana noma abafundi bakithi abafundayo. Ngizoyisukumela lento ngeenyawo zombili. Kukhona okunye sizokumemezela kungekudala ukuthi siqonde ukwenzani ukuthi sakhe indawo zabafundi zokuhlala engcono. Further announcement will be made during the course of this year, including pilot programs to test various strategies and plans to significantly increase the number of student beds for both university and TVET college students. I've asked our DG to prioritize this matter. I've also asked NSFAS to prioritize this matter of accelerated provision of student accommodation. There is no uniformity, for instance, in the cost structure of university-owned accommodation, for instance, whilst NSFAS pays for private accommodation based on the highest cost of accommodation for institutions. In the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021, NSFAS spent an average of 11.9 billion rand per annum on student accommodation funding. Now, it's important to emphasize this because often when there are problems, then we are presented as if this government and NSFAS is not doing anything about student accommodation. There is no such 11.9 billion rands in 1 year that NSFAS spends on student accommodation. It's a lot of money, which shows government seriousness and commitment. However, there are challenges, which this press briefing today is indicating on how we plan to do that. At least 420,000 students each year are in university and TVET accommodation. Out of this, approximately 43% are in student accommodation owned by institutions, and 57% are in privately owned accommodation. My view, simply, is that with NSFAS carrying about 12 billion rand in funding student accommodation, we can use this money much more creatively to access more billions of rands to actually accelerate the construction of decent student accommodation. I've asked both my DG and NSFAS to urgently look into how do we use this advantage that we have. You know, I'm now reached a stage that this thing of NSFAS simply just guaranteeing anyhow, anywhere, student accommodation without both us as the department and NSFAS having a say on how that money is being used, it's not something that is acceptable. We need to change that. We need to have much more say. Similarly, teaching. This thing of just giving institutions money for building infrastructure and including student accommodation, and we are not closer to how those monies are being spent, is being irresponsible on our part. We need to come closer. In fact, we need a system that is controlled and visible from the center, whilst of course taking into account different regional or local conditions. I feel very strongly about this. I think if we can do that, we will be able to address a lot of these problems that we are experiencing. I have, by the way, I'm not complaining, I have asked, as I have said, both NSFAS and the DG to address these matters. For instance, the average university residence accommodation cost per student increased from 33,950 rand per annum in 2020 to 41,714 in the 2022 academic year. For TVET colleges, application of accommodation caps stabilized average accommodation costs to an estimated 24,125 in 2022. By the way, one of the things we've got to address is that this is an average, but costs of accommodation are not the same in different parts of the country where our institutions are located. The unregulated accommodation increases for private accommodation is a serious challenge for the sector and the students. To manage increasing costs of student accommodation, there is a need for a sector engagement that will facilitate regulation and centralization of funding norms and standards for student accommodation across the post-school education and training system. To this extent, NSFAS will be hosting from this coming Sunday to Tuesday, a student accommodation housing or student housing summit in Mangaung. All interested stakeholders in the student accommodation sector are invited to participate at the summit by visiting www.nesfassummit.co.za for more information. The objective of the summit is to create a platform for consultation with stakeholders in the student housing market. The summit will be a forum for exploring suitable solutions and conditions and guidelines for student accommodation, accreditation, pricing, and other value-added services for the benefit of our students. After the summit, NSFAS is expected to develop a sustainable NSFAS student accommodation framework and effective instruments for the post-school education and training sector to overcome the challenges I've just outlined. One of the most persistent complaints that I received, including on my Facebook, by the way, some of my Facebook friends and posts, they say, yeah, the minister is not interested. I read every post in Facebook about the sector that I'm working in.
Not something I can help with yet.
I hope that's not responding to me. So one of the most persistent complaints that I received is the timely payment of allowances for student accommodation and unscrupulous syndicates, by the way, who are seeking to defraud students of their allowances. We're getting closer to that. NSFAS has responded to this challenge by implementing direct disbursement of allowances into the bank account of NSFAS funded students. However, Chair of NSFAS and DG, I do need to say this. It's not ideal to pay cash into students' bank accounts for accommodation. We have to work towards finding a different system because we know for a fact that some of the students don't use that money for what it is intended for. We know some of them, they get this money and they go and stay in some unideal accommodation in order to pocket the change. That's not good. Also, when then some of those students encounter problems, we then get blamed as government, when in fact we have paid money for students to be able to access decent accommodation. Otherwise, we're going to do what we must not do with NSFAS. I do need to say this. NSFAS is not a social grant. NSFAS is an education grant. It's not a social grant. In other words, it is meant exclusively for studying. It can't be used for anything else. We know some of the students will try and save some money in order to help at home because they are poor. We understand, but still that is not what NSFAS is meant for. We understand the pressure they are under, but NSFAS is not meant for that. I think that the sooner we are able to find a safer and sustainable system that does not allow money meant for accommodation to be pocketed for other ends, the better. Now, service providers also that will now help us and help NSFAS to disperse allowances to students have already been appointed. Am I right?
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay. Because that's your problem. Anyone who wants to ask that, NSFAS assures me that service providers that will help us with facilitating disbursement of allowances have been appointed, because that has also been one of our problems. Also, a pilot will be initiated will be initiated at the beginning of July, to perfect this system and processes. This pilot is expected to last for 3 months, after which the program will be fully rolled out. NSFAS can explain the details of that. This process will ensure timely payment of allowances and will introduce the necessary controls, efficiencies, and safeguards. As I say, NSFAS will provide details on that. We are very pleased that there is progress in improving the management and disbursement of allowances. One of the issues that I will be confronting as a matter of urgency, that I intend to confront, that's a better way of putting it, are those students who are benefiting illegally from NSFAS student funding by falsifying that information and documentation submitted. DG and Chair and CEO of NSFAS, I'm just getting too many anecdotes, they begin to worry me, of senior professionals and managers who are working well and earning well, whose kids are beneficiaries of NSFAS. They are thieves, those people, because they know that they don't qualify, but they have found a way of provision of false information such that students who come from better off families benefit from NSFAS, whilst poor students from the working class continue to be excluded. I'm targeting this, I'm aiming at this. I will be working with the South African Revenue Services and SASSA, because I suspect part of the entry point is through SASSA. Work with SASSA to verify the data submitted by all students. Should it be established that students falsified their information, or parents for that matter, they will have to pay back that money. And also, we will have to open criminal cases against them. We will make announcements, not long from now, DG, on this matter, because I think we must start this as a campaign. We cannot allow NSFAS money to be abused. Those who are abusing it must be nailed, because they are actually stealing from the poor. Too many, I'm told. You know, some they even point out. I know someone who is a hugely successful senior official in government, together with a maid, together with a wife, who is a senior matron in a hospital. Their kids are getting NSFAS. How come? And we cannot allow this situation to continue, because as government we do not have enough resources. Corruption on this score will have to be fought relentlessly, as it is deserving poor students who get disadvantaged and excluded because of fraud and corruption by those who do not qualify. As I say, our DG and NSFAS will make the necessary announcement. I want us to launch this investigation and campaign. I was told, by the way, by NSFAS, if I'm not mistaken, that already last year you picked up 5,000 students. How many? 34,000 who were benefiting from NSFAS, yet they came from families who do not qualify. 34,000. It means there is a serious problem, and this problem has to be addressed. I will also take responsibility, by the way, to engage my colleagues in the law enforcement system to work with us so that we are able to deal with these problems. And we want to urge all parents and students not to continue to do this. Anecdotes. And as for students driving a motor vehicle, uyithatha phi imoto umfundi kaNSFAS? Uyithenga ngani imoto? Uyithengele ubani lo moto? Udrive imoto, une-flat screen erumini, ne-system music, but uyi-NSFAS beneficiary. Surely there must be something wrong that is happening. Also, we need, by the way, to look at, I don't want to preempt the report that I'm taking to Cabinet on comprehensive student funding. We're also finding that government is spending not one, but a couple of billion rands through bursaries that are offered by national government departments, provincial governments, municipalities. It's lots of money. And some of the students are double dipping. They are getting those bursaries and getting money from NSFAS. That is why DG is very urgent that we get our systems working so that we are able to pick this up. Now, let me then moving towards ending just the last two sections I want to deal with. Just on some current developments in some of our institutions. We've dealt now with matters relating to student funding and NSFAS, ongoing problems. And I have said I'm calling all stakeholders that we work together to address whatever glitches and problems we are experiencing, because money for qualifying students has been found and it must be used efficiently. I'm pleased to say that our post-school education and training sector largely remains stable and focused on its core mandate of providing access to quality education. I am, however, concerned about continuing instability in few of our post-school institutions, including the University of South Africa, UNISA, the Central University of Technology, Mangosuthu University of Technology, and the Valley University of Technology, as well as Tshwane University of Technology. I remain seized with the challenges in these institutions. Next week, I will be meeting the Council of UNISA to discuss their response to the findings and recommendations to a ministerial task team that I had appointed to look at the business and operating model of UNISA. Shortly after hearing the views of Council, I will, without any further delay, DG, announce my response to the findings of that ministerial task team, taking into account both the views of Council and other developments at these institutions. I'm also determined to ensure that Council, management, and all other stakeholders at UNISA must remain focused on the core mandate of that institution. What is the core mandate of UNISA? The core mandate of UNISA is not its 4 billion rands budget for the sake of it. It's teaching and learning. And one of the most urgent tasks of UNISA is actually to improve its throughput and pass rate. Everyone who is at UNISA, from council members to ordinary workers, must ensure that UNISA's mandate is an academic mandate. It's not a mandate for tenders. Just like all our institutions, let's not preoccupy ourselves with supply chain issues at the expense of the core mandate. Umsebenzi we-UNISA ukuthi abantu abafunda khona abancane nabadala bafunde baphase. Kuyofundwa lapha, akuyi kodliwa isenti ngendlela engacacile. Of course, as minister, I can only act to support those who are committed to that mandate. But the institution itself needs to get its act together to focus on the academic project, which is what I'm prepared to support. I'm also concerned about instances of instability and destruction of property at UNISA. I have urged management to ensure that it continuously engages all stakeholders on all issues that affect the stability of that institution. But at the same time, destruction of property and threats to the safety of people in the institution must be strongly condemned, and swift action must be taken to stop this. I urge that swift action be taken by law enforcement agencies against all such destructive activities. I welcome UNISA's, NEHAW's response on this, luck. They said that one of their leaders has been recorded making threats, and they said they must be given time to investigate that and deal with it. Thanks, NEHAW, for doing that, but we are not going to wait forever. Don't tell us we are still working weeks after weeks. It's important that as a credible progressive union, you honor your word to ensure that we do not allow people in the ranks of our union movement or students who threaten people and people's lives. That is not acceptable. I will also be further communicating with the Council of the MUT, the Mangosuthu University of Technology, regarding my proposed actions to address the management issues and problems in that institution. I will make the necessary announcement, DG and Marcia, by no later than the next 14 days regarding the Mangosuthu University of Technology. I'm also in the process of engaging the councils of CUT and VUT about actions that are required to stabilize these institutions as a matter of agency. I also wish to urge all stakeholders in our institutions that we need to protect the writing of exams, and that exams must not be used as a bargaining chip, as a bargaining platform. As disruptions of exam threaten the future of our students, whose overwhelming majority want to study and graduate without any undue delays. Similarly, we must desist and strongly condemn disruption of graduation ceremonies. Our institutions of higher learning are at their core places to prepare young people for a life of democratic citizenship, where we use the power of intellectual and social engagement to foster a world free from the scourge of violence, hatred, discrimination, and inequality. That's what our universities are. For many communities, especially those with relatives studying at university for the first time, in all generations of a family, graduation obtains an almost sacred meaning as it represents the collective achievements and sacrifices of past generations. In my youth days, you will never, in the name of comradeship, disrupt my graduation ceremony. As the first graduate in the history of my family to ever wear that special black gown and that strange hat, as some people call it. Now, to disrupt these graduation ceremonies for families traveling from across vast differences, often from other countries, for instance, is a travesty of our democratic ideals. The majority of these graduates in our country are in any case from working class families, and thanks to NSFAS. By the way, in black African working class communities, a graduation ceremony is as important as a wedding. So we urge that let's not gamble. Whatever demands we have, we can't disrupt graduation ceremonies because we want whatever demands. You can't make the working class suffer in the name of the working class. You can't trade one advantage of the working class against another. During the month of July, I intend engaging with all the trade unions organized in our post-school education and training sector, as well as the South African Union of Students, as part of our ongoing engagements with key stakeholders in the sector, in order to ensure that our sector remains stable and focused on its core mandate of learning, teaching, research, and community outreach. Shortly after engaging unions and students, I will be engaging university vice-chancellors and college principals, including in the CET sector, as part of our ongoing engagements. I also wish to call upon all in our post-school education and training sector to desist from destruction of property and any threat to life and limb in our institutions during protests. Destruction of property is nothing but an act of sabotage of our education system. What I saw at the gate of Mangosuthu University of Technology yesterday or day before yesterday is completely unacceptable. In fact, that's staggering if we are to call that what it is. Why would you ban university property? For what reason? Destruction of property, by the way, does not only affect the education of current students, but compromises the educational interests of generations to come. This must simply not be tolerated, and all needs to be done to ensure the protection of public property in our country and institutions. Sometimes we are told there is language we are not allowed to use as ministers. But if I can use the language of the progressive forces of this country, to destroy public property is counter-revolutionary. and it must be treated as such. At the height of apartheid, the late Oliver Tambo used to say, no matter how angry you can be, what protests you have, don't destroy a single education institutions, because we will need those institutions after we overthrow apartheid. That's what Oliver Tambo used to say. Today it's so easy for people to just destroy university and other public property in whatever name they say that. It's not acceptable. We are urging all that we must desist from this. On our side, we will do whatever we can, our contribution to address whatever problems are there. Let me end by saying I'm very pleased to announce today, although I'll be giving further information at an appropriate time, that I have now received the final report from the Ministerial Task Team on student funding for our country. This brings to an end the Ministerial Task Team's work of developing policy proposals for a long-term student financial aid policy, and takes into account the comprehensive student financial aid needs of our post-school education and training sector. I will now be presenting this report to Cabinet shortly for its consideration. I would like to take this opportunity to particularly thank Professor Mtose of the University of Zululand, who ably chaired this Ministerial Task Team, and all the members of the task team, as well as all those who participated in this exercise. In conclusion, I have already requested the NSFAS board to prepare for the opening of the application window for student funding for the 2023 academic year. The sooner NSFAS opens the application window period for funding, the better for having a good start to the 2023 academic year. Let me take this opportunity to thank the leadership of NSFAS, the chair, the CEO, and your senior management and all the staff, and our TVET colleges and universities, and the many other people for the work that they are doing. I would also like to thank the student leadership in our institutions, the trade unions in our sector, and the national student organizations for their support and cooperation. I would also like to thank Dr. Ngosnati Sishi, the DG of our DHET, for his able leadership of the department, together with his executive management and all staff members. Our DG remains seized with swift attendance to all the problems in our PSET sector. Thank you very much. This was progress report and reporting back to the country on these very important